What is up, everybody? It is Chris Aiken from your Classic Metal Show. And I am normally, when I do these interview type things, we start off with a song and we do some kind of cheeseball lead into it. You know, hey, that was Slayer with Criminally Insane. And speaking of guys that are criminally insane, here's DX Ferris. But I'm not doing that because I didn't even lead into it that way. DX Ferris is an old friend. He's also a very accomplished writer. He's written a bunch of books. He's been featured. He was a feature writer for Alternative Press and Rolling Stone, and he's a pro. I consider myself to be quite the amateur by comparison, but DX is a pro. He's written some great books. He has 3 of them that are the most recent 3, and actually 4 if you count his Donnie Iris book, but the ones that we're going to primarily focus on today in this interview are Suburban Metal Dad, which is his comic. It's like a comic strip type of a book that is really kind of socially incorrect sort of thing. The new one is called Christmas Sevenfold, which is it's his Christmassy type comic. The other book that he has is, he just added new chapters to his book on Slayer, which is called Slayer, 66 2/3, the Jeff and Dave years. It's been updated with some new chapters to focus on the, release of Repentless and the comings and goings of Slayer since then. And the main topic of discussion is a book that I highly, highly recommend. It's one of the few that I've ever read. I've talked about it on the show before, and I think I'm probably going to keep talking about it because it's a fucking great book. It's called Good Advice from Goodfellas. It's a unique idea. It's a self-help book of sorts, but it takes its cues from different things that were said and done in the movie Goodfellas. So if you like Goodfellas at all, you will love this book, and it is really kind of eye-opening to see somebody get creative with a self-help book instead of, the normal bullshit that you normally read with the just stay positive, and if you stay positive, good things will happen to you. So say positive, positive, positive 15 times a day, and you will make money. It's not like that. DX has a very unique style and a very unique way of presenting what are some very, very quality life lessons. So good advice from Goodfellas, positive life lessons from the best mob movie. That's the big long title. As you'll hear right from the start, DX and I just sort of get into it. So we didn't do any kind of intro and any kind of an interview type of a thing at all. It's just 2 old buds kind of catching up and talking to each other. And since we kind of live in a parallel universe, DX and I, with writing books and publishing them ourselves and kind of doing them our own way, it led to some very interesting discussions. So check it out. It is my chat with author DX Ferris.
Well, man, I've been so fucking busy. I can't even take time to put Christmas music on my iPhone. I'm like Chris Aiken busy.
Well, that is busy, my friend. Let me just tell you. Nice. Well, DX, let's talk about your various writings, because we could talk about old history all day long. But people need, and I said this to you, when we were trading emails, but You have 3 projects that are out right now. We can talk about any of them. I'm going to start with what I think is arguably the best self-help book that has ever been produced. And I'm not just kissing your ass saying that.
Oh, thank you, brother.
I cannot... I don't read books. I really don't. I'm the one guy that writes them and does not read them. In my life, I've read, I don't know, 5, 6 books. And I skim a ton. I mean, I get every book that comes out, and I skim it, but I don't really read it. And the reason I don't read it is because it doesn't keep my interest very long. This book is, and the name of the book for people that are out there and in front of a computer and need to go to Amazon, is Good Advice from Goodfellas. The reason I think this book is so good is not necessarily because you wrote a self-help book and used one of the greatest movies of all time to reference it, but because it is such a reach from the normal standard of, well, if you do this, you'll have success. Instead, it reaches into something that we all love. And you find me somebody that'll tell you that Goodfellas isn't a great movie. I'll show you somebody that doesn't know anything about movies.
I don't want to be associated with the kind of people that would say that kind of thing.
But you found a way to take the lives of these three despicable people and all the despicable people that were around them in this movie and found the silver lining in literally everything that they did in order to prove how you can be a productive person in life. It is a fascinating, I don't know that I would say read as much as I would say mental picture that you drew through these, 300 and whatever pages of how many pages this book is, man. It's fantastic.
145 short chapters.
Yeah.
145 very short chapters. So something like 320, 340, something like that pages. But it's real short. I made it to be readable. So you could pick it up, put it down, come back to it. Mm-hmm. The more I write, the more obsessed I am with going short instead of long.
Sure. No, dude, it's a fascinating read. And I mean, my first question that I would actually have is, how in the world did you come up with this concept? Were you just sitting around watching the movie and you were like, oh, okay, well, that could, if I did this, then this would equate to that. I mean, how do you come up with it?
It was a combination of things. I wrote a very short version of this almost 20 years ago for my college newspaper.
Okay.
And it was like half a page. And at the time, Tony Soprano in The Sopranos, that's when The Sopranos was like new and it was happening. Tony Soprano made a joke in The Sopranos. I talk about this in the book. He goes, the book, Tomato Soup for the Soul, or Chicken Soup for the Soul. Mm-hmm. You should read the Italian version of it. It's called Tomato Sauce for Your Ass.
Right.
And that resonated with me to a degree. I like Goodfellas, and I was watching Bronx Tale and Goodfellas. And I'm a lifelong, I would have called it insomniac through most of my life, but I've realized that I'm just a genetically hardwired night person.
Okay.
I want to be awake at night. My body wants to be awake at night. And I spent a lot of time watching Goodfellas and watching Bronx Tale over and over again. And those were just movies that, in Bronx Tale especially, you had a guy that had seen some gangster shit and was telling you about like the good and the bad of it, saying this is how to make your way through life. This is what you do. This is how life works. So I thought, you know what? Tomato sauce for your soul, tomato sauce for the soul, chicken soup for the soul. A book was big at the time called All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. That was a motivational book. So I was kind of mulling over those ideas, and I thought, you know what? Everything I need to know, I learned from Goodfellas and Bronx Tale.
Right.
And that was the genesis of it. So that idea has been rattling around in my head for like 20 years of how you can look at this thing but still learn useful things from it. The subtitle of it is Positive Life Lessons from the Best Mob Movie.
Right.
So it's not about how to be a better gangster. It's not about how to beat somebody effectively. It's about how to look at these people in the mess they made of their lives and their opportunities and the successes that they wasted and how to do better than them.
Sure.
Yeah, to tie it full circle, this summer I was coming off a couple things and I was listening to a couple business podcasts. And the people that were calling in, on one hand, were achievers and positive, and they're the kind of people that get things done, but they didn't sound like they had any kind of sense at all to them.
Right.
You get people calling in and leaving voicemails for podcasts. Just, it's painfully obvious they're trying to sound like they're on NPR.
Right.
Hi, how you doing, Chris? I'm a passionate side hustler.
Right.
And, we live in Australia, and we want to move to Washington, D.C., but my husband doesn't, and I'm afraid of disrupting our everyday life. And I'm wondering how we can move from one country to another without disrupting our life and our friends and our work life.
Right.
Like, what in the blue fuck are you talking about?
Right, exactly.
Like you haven't enough going on that you have opportunities on two continents, but on the other hand, you're saying, well, how can I move from one country to another without disrupting my marriage and my professional career? Like, do you have any sense at all?
Right.
And once I realized that, I kept hearing it in podcast after podcast and book after book. Like, well, how am I supposed to be a successful person? Like, I don't know.
Huh.
Get some sense.
Right.
So, yeah. So, I looked at Goodfellas and think, well, these are guys that know how to treat people. Even though they're sociopaths and murderers, they're not rude,
right?
Generally. And in one context after another, I keep looking at people like, wow, you just don't know how to treat people. You don't know how to make people want to do business with you. As a boss, you treat people badly because you can, and they would never put up with you. You look at Jimmy Conway in the movie. He's a generous guy.
Right.
He makes people want to work with him. It's not a competition all the time. He knows that if you make more money and I make more money, he will make more money.
Right.
So to answer your question, I just realized that the people in this iconic movie, they know how to treat people. They know how to get things done. They might mess it up.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. That's what makes it useful.
Sure.
The people that listen to these podcasts think, well, I need to be more like Tim Ferriss and I need to be more like Tony Robbins. Like, you can't do that.
Right.
Like, people go see, a seminar, or they go listen to a podcast and they spend 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 days going, yes, I'm like that. I'm Tony Robbins now. I'm going to be successful. Success, success, success. Positive mental attitude. And then it drifts off and they go back to it.
Right.
The whole reason that Goodfellas is a useful case study in effective management, positive attitude, achievement, is because they make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
We probably cannot do as well as LeBron James and Tony Robbins and whoever, but we can probably do better than Henry Hill did.
Sure. And the interesting thing too is, and you're making a great point, is the one thing that those guys did, even though that they were, insane psychopaths, especially the big three main characters in it, was that they were so relatable and genuinely not scary. I mean, you look at the scene of, when they stop at Tommy's mom's house, and and she wakes up in the middle of the night, and they got Billy Batts meanwhile in the trunk of the car. But it's just this casual dinner. It's like, even though they're in the middle of this heinous crime, they're still so personable that the mom does not pick up on the fact that, yeah, they stopped by to get a knife to kill this guy. It is interestingly unique,
Yeah, and they're colorful and they have a little bit of personality. They're not just sitting there with their hands quietly folded, hoping that somebody notices them. They get noticed.
Sure. Well, dude, it really is a fascinating book. And, I'm probably 4/5 of the way through it. I have not gotten all the way through it yet, just because my life does not leave me the opportunity to read an hour a day, which sucks.
No, I understand. This is what I want for Christmas this year. Yeah. I want enough time to read some of this shit that I got for Christmas last year.
Right.
So I understand. And I'll tell you what, I'll say this. Here's how I know you're being sincere, and I'm not busting your balls and saying this. Like 2 weeks ago, you said, hey, send them out to me and I'll call you next week and we'll set up a phoner.
Yeah.
And you did not do that week, and you didn't do it the week after. But on Facebook immediately, you were posting about this, and you posted your favorite quote from the book. I was like, he didn't call me, but that's because he's reading the thing. It works. It works, and if it works for you, that means it works. That's the kind of book I'm trying to make.
Well, and I mean, dude, I mean, you've done interviews before with some of your other books. Half the time you get into an interview and you get into it with somebody that's never read your book. I mean, I've done the press run with 4 of the 5 books that I've put out, and I can't tell you how many times I get on the phone with somebody and they're like, "Oh, so tell me what your book's about."
Chris, I guess you were sick or you were hurt, or was it something? What was it?
Yeah, what happened to you? It's this whole there's nothing more deflating than that, because it's like, all right, I really don't want to fucking talk to you about, something that I poured in, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it is, to writing. and you just want to ask me the same questions that you would ask anybody that hands you a stack of papers that's bound. You know, it's like, no, you know, I don't want to do it. And dude, I did, for the current book that I have, I've done, I think, 15 or 16 interviews, and half of them were, so are you a fan of Judas Priest? Half of the interviews asked me, am I a fan of Judas Priest? It's like, you know what, dude?
No, I thought I would write a book about Turbo for no reason.
Yeah, I almost want to say, you know what, dude? Thanks for calling. Click. But, you know.
I did the research, and Judas Priest was a hot thing, so I thought I would cash in on it.
Yeah, exactly. I figured, why not them? That's a hot button these days. Judas Priest Turbo.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, dude, I'll tell you what is a hot button right now is your other book that you just recently updated. And I have read this book other than the updates. I have read this book completely when it came out, however many years ago it came out. And it is, I always tell people ask me all the time to recommend books to them. And I always, when they ask about Slayer, I say Joel MacGyver's The Bloody Reign of Slayer and your book, 66 2/3, you know, are the definitive Slayer books. There's no need really to read any other ones, including your little one. All you need is this book, the 66 2/3, the what is it, the Jeff and Dave years.
Yeah.
You know,
and now it's the post-Relentless remastered edition.
Right. But it's all that, if you're a Slayer fan, you have to own this book. You have to own this book the same as you have to own Seasons in the Abyss or, you know, or any of the Slayer records, you know, up through Seasons in the Abyss.
No, well, thank you. Thank you for your support then, and thank you for your support now. And, you know, in the words of, I probably said it last time, in the words of David Lee Roth, in addition to, not instead of.
Right.
Don't choose between mine and Mr. MacGyver's. Get them both.
Absolutely.
Get them both. He has his angle. I have mine. And anybody who's serious about, I don't know if you want to call it scholarship or professionalism, but anybody who's serious about research knows that one person cannot cover all the bases. You can try. Mm-hmm. But, you know, one person has to push it along to a certain point, and another person has to push it along. And he covers some things that I didn't have time to get into, and he has an orientation. My book on Rain and Blood, you know, say what you will about it, or say what you will about me. As a fan of the entire Def Jam catalog, I think that made me a good choice to write it.
Sure.
Joel is not as much of a rap guy, so he has more of a rock orientation. Mm-hmm. He gets to some rock people in his book that I never would have thought to and get to. But that's just, by treating the book and the subject seriously, you know that one person can't cover everything.
Sure.
And that's what I'm trying to do as a professional, is to just push the knowledge forward. And do I cover everything I would like to in the book? Can I get to everybody I would like to talk to and ask them every single question? No, right. But I hope sometimes somebody else can take it a little bit further. Sure. But for now, nobody else was, so I went back to my old book, I updated it, and now it is, if nothing, not obsolete.
Right. What was it? I found it interesting, and like I said, I have not read the updates, but I found it interesting that you chose to go back in, because, especially with Repentless, because it's clearly kind of not what the rest of the book covered. You know, I mean, it definitely, you know, the title itself, the Jeff and Dave years, well, neither Jeff or Dave are there, you know, for Repentless. What pushed you back in to take another look? Well,
when Slayer, about a year or whatever ago, when they announced that Repentless was in fact going to be their final album, and this is their quote-unquote final world tour. Mm-hmm. We can talk about what that means and does not mean,
right?
What the chances of it being quote-unquote true are. Once they announced that, certain aspects of my book, as I said, became obsolete.
Right.
You know, when I wrote it 5 years ago, I said, listen, if you think Kerry King is going to retire his band while Dave Mustaine is out there with Megadeth, you're crazy. Like, he will die on stage before he lets Dave Mustaine be the one big four guy out there flying the flag.
Right.
And I believed that. I don't think I was wrong about that, except for the fact that I turned out to be wrong about that. So certain things about that, I didn't want to have a book out there that was just
Dated?
yeah, dated, exactly. It ends saying like, "Hey, it's Slayer. Life goes on. They're champions. Maybe they're a little different now, but Slayer forever, as it always will be."
Right.
Until.
Right.
So as long as I was going in and cleaning that up, I wanted to add in some extra stuff to make it readable, to make it a necessary read, and as I said, not obsolete. So I added in things like a book report about the book that Tom's sister wrote.
Right.
About the Araya family saga, which is a fascinating saga.
Sure.
Growing up in Chile and the things her dad did to move her family to Los Angeles and help fund the band, and his Catholic faith and how that informed Tom and really affected Slayer. Every now and then I try not to read the reviews, but people will get offended, as you know, when you say, well, I like this album. I didn't like that album.
Right.
So what I did was I conducted something I called the Slatanic survey, where I asked a bunch of people to weigh in on what their favorite albums were. What are your favorite songs? What do you think is the best album of the trilogy? I added that in. Repentless represented the continuation of their career without Rick Rubin, their longtime producer. So I don't have all the answers on that, but there's enough in there to bring you some new information without claiming to overrepresent that I know more than I do about the last couple years.
Sure.
As long as I was doing it, I wanted to clean it up. I made it look a lot different. I think it looks way gnarlier now.
Sure. No, it looks cool, man. When you did decide to go back in and write some stuff, did you have to go back and read what you had already written first, or was it still fresh in your mind? Because I know for me, once I say the book is closed, I mean, the book is closed. I do not go back and look at anything.
Yeah, I don't really look at my own stuff. I mean, my first book about Slayer, the one about Rain and Blood, that was like 10 years ago this year. And when I look back at that, sometimes I crack it open, I flip through, I'm like, oh, this is good. I got some good stuff here. And, it's not so much about me, but like MC Search from Third Base was part of the Def Jam crew army at the time.
Right.
And I mean, I got some input from Rick Rubin. I got some input from Russell Simmons, but out of everybody I talked to from the band and everybody, MC Search was the best storyteller.
Right.
So I go back and I read that stuff like, oh, this is good. I'm glad I talked to that guy. Right. So yeah, I had to do some revisiting and see what I said and what I meant, because once I was done with that, I kind of move on. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about Slayer day to day.
Right.
I don't listen to them as much as I used to, because I spent a lot of time just clinically going over it over and over and over again, because I had to. So yeah, I had to go back and look a little bit.
Yeah. See, dude, that is such a great point. And it's one that I live as well, too. I've written the 3 music books so far, the Metallica Black Album, the Motley 94, and now Turbo. And since I've written those 3, I'm pretty much done with those 3 bands. Because I especially, I don't know how you were with Slayer, but I know for me, when I wrote each of those books, every day I listened to it. Every single day I listened to the topic of what I was writing about to keep my brain almost engaged, and to where now it's like, man, I don't want to hear, as much as I love those records, I don't want to hear any of them. I'd rather listen to anything other than those 3 records now.
Yeah, I've always been like that as a music writer. I always felt it, at least through parts of it. I mean, sometimes you got to concentrate and have the music off, but for part of it, I think you need to have the music on the background. Mm-hmm. And something about that, I got to think subconsciously just seeps in.
Sure.
If nothing's doing a little bit more homework, maybe you think about something, or maybe you notice something when you're not directly paying attention to it. Something about that, I think, permeates the work and informs what you're doing.
Right. Have you had to, and this goes more to, when you were writing, when you're doing music writing in general, not just books, but I'll just go with my example. I guess I'm using mine, comparing my career to yours, I guess is what this is about today. But when I was writing for Scene, and when I had my own magazine, and
I'll interrupt you. Not for nothing do I call you brother. I'm not just saying, hey brother, what's going on? How you doing, man? Like we do. That's kind of my big thing lately. Like I look at people and I think like, you are me, we are us.
Yeah.
I mean, You do the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you got a bunch of books out. You know the struggle.
Yeah, I do.
So I'm not just bullshitting
No.
hey, buddy.
No,
Like,
not at
I'm
all.
glad
Dude.
to be talking to you about this. So
Oh, yeah.
sorry, going back to Scene.
Going back to Scene, and then even when I had my own magazine, Music's Bottom Line, I got to a point where I hated music. I mean, I got so sick of writing about it and so tired of doing interviews and so tired of trying to, trying to listen to 100 CDs so that I could write about 10 of them and write something.
It becomes a job.
Yeah.
And you're lucky to have that work.
Yeah. But
it's a job.
But at the same time, you as a writer, when you're writing volume, and that's what I consider music writing for me was volume. It was not a creative art as much as it was just volume. And I literally had to stop at some point because I found even my own reviews that I was writing. I'm writing 500-word reviews on whatever record came out. And they got to the point where it was like just the same words over and over again, and take out this band name and put in this name and put, it all ended up being the same. It all started.
Yeah, amen.
It's
amen.
all led by the vocals of insert name here, followed by the incredibly guitar blah, blah, blah of this guy here. And then there's the rhythm section that really powers the bottom end and I got to the point where I was like, God damn it, I'm writing the same shit over and over and over again. And people are still telling me how great it is. But in my own head, it's no longer great. It's homework.
Yeah, you're just doing the thing.
Yeah.
And this is, again, about 10,000. 10 years ago is when I started losing interest in popular music.
Sure.
I made my name as a music writer.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked for Rolling Stone, worked for Alternative Press.
Right.
I haven't been to the top of the mountaintop, but I've been out that way,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But about 10 years ago, I looked at a bunch of people that were older music writers, and I decided I didn't want to become those people.
Right.
I was starting to be less emotionally invested, and I'm sure you can relate to this.
Oh, yeah.
You look at some older music writers, and you read a review, and I'm not saying I never did it, but sometimes you read a review, and you're like, well, they were clearly just very cranky that they had to even listen to this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not happy about it, and they're making these references that are very outdated. And, at a certain point, the music is clearly not important to you, but
Right.
You think of yourself as a connoisseur and as a curator and as a music person or whatever, and you're still writing about stuff that you have no business writing about.
Right.
And the whole reason that I got into the music business or the music writing business was that, after 10 years or whatever of reading Rolling Stone and reading a record review and thinking, this sounds interesting, I'll go get this.
Yeah.
And I dropped $16-18 on the CD, and it's shit.
Right.
I thought, you know what? I think if I had the opportunity, I could do the job at least as poorly as these people do. I think I could do at least as bad as the pros or come close to
Sure.
it. So if nothing, I like to think I've done that.
Dude.
And I didn't want to become that guy.
Right.
I didn't want to be the guy like, well, yeah, I like the new hotness. What Between Buried and Me or Between the Buried and Me are doing is really very interesting. I like deathcore.
Right.
So I just looked at a handful of people that were older than me and thought, you know what? 10 years from now, I don't want to be them.
Right.
I see what she's doing. She's successful. I don't think I have what she has.
Mm-hmm.
I see what this guy's doing. I don't think I have the spark that he has even at this point. I got to get out of this.
Right.
And I was getting really into TV at the time, and I thought, you know what? People are starting to take TV writing seriously. Maybe I will do that. And then I thought, you know what? I'm tired of music at this point. I don't want watching TV to become a job again. I don't want music to become a job again.
Right.
I don't want what I watch and enjoy to become a job and work. I just want to be able to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of tapped out of the music writing game, and I just decided I would do my own thing, and that's
Right.
what I've been doing.
Dude, the parallels are ridiculous. I got into the writing game. I had never written anything in my life. I mean, nothing. And was a bad student in English, for God's sakes. I mean, I was not the guy that should be writing anything. But the one thing that I did, after I got hurt, I was home for 4 years and I had nothing to fucking do. So I would read Scene cover to cover, and I would just write letters to the editor about how bad the fucking review sucked. You know, that's what I was doing. I was just writing, you know, every review I would read, and I'd be like, oh, this guy clearly doesn't know anything about Overkill. How dare he write this about? And so I wrote some letter to the editor, and Steve Batten, who was the music editor at the time, and Kimberly Hagelberg, who was the, I guess she was just the editor or whatever, you know, the overall editor, emailed me back or messaged me back. I don't remember how long, because this was 95, 96, probably email, I guess. But they hit me back and were like, do you think you could do better? And I was like, yes, I do.
Yes.
and I immediately went into doing it. And I wrote reviews and people reacted, good and bad. And, you know, before long, I'm interviewing Dio and New Edition and, you know, whoever it was. Dude, the first interview I ever did was New Edition, and it made the cover. It was the cover of Scene, the first ever interview I ever did. And it's like,
and you know, that's what it really takes. Like, I've talked about this elsewhere. That's what it takes to be successful in the, you know, in pretty much any business.
Sure.
You don't turn down work.
Mm-hmm.
But especially in the music business, like, I saw so many people that would say, oh, I want to write about music. I want to write about music. I want to write about music. Okay, well, New Edition's coming in. Oh, no, I don't like that shit, man. I like metal.
Right.
Okay, well, you're not going to be a working music writer then.
No, not at all. Yeah, you have to.
That's what it takes. If you want to get in the game, you got to be able to handle some shit.
Yeah, and you got to be a pro's pro all the time. You know, I mean, one of the biggest, the two big things that I've had, I certainly have never had the, you know, I mean, you like walked all the way up the ladder. Rolling Stone's about as high as it gets as a music writer, unless you're really looking at like LA Weekly or something as a featured writer or something. But Rolling Stone is pretty high up, and I was fortunate enough to have two things that I sold to Rolling Stone. I sold, and one to MTV, which was like the best, to me was the greatest thing in the world, to have Kurt Loder say my name or the name of my magazine and then play a clip, which, you know, just, I couldn't have been more happy. Which,
yeah, your head explodes.
Yeah, and, you know, the things that I got most lucky with was I got Peter Criss, when Psycho Circus came out, to admit that he didn't play all the drums, but then throw Gene Simmons under the bus saying he didn't play all the bass either. you know, and Kurt Loder or MTV picked up on it, and Rolling Stone. They both picked up on it, which was like so great. And then the other thing that I had was I had a review of the Icebreaker tour, which was Tupac and Dog Pound and, you know, all the Death Row artists, and, you know, and I went, and I actually went to the hotel and interviewed Tupac ahead of the show that day.
No shit. I did not know that.
Yeah. And it was like the greatest thing ever. You know, I was just thrilled because I was a huge fan of Tupac, and I was thrilled that, you know, I did this thing, and then I get a phone call from Scene saying, hey, do you want to sell this story to, or do you want us to sell this story to Rolling Stone? We'll pay you whatever. Well, it was nothing. It was, you know, like $200 or something. You know, it wasn't like it was it's not like I got rich off it or anything.
No, it's good money.
But I was like, you could give it to Rolling Stone as long as they spell my name right. I don't care. You know, you know, and that was what it was it, at that moment I had the passion for it. But at the end, especially at the end of Music's Bottom Line, I was so burned out, and I was so like, I would get you know, I had built myself a reputation where all the publicists knew me, and I know you've done this before too, dude, where everybody likes you, everybody knows that you'll be able to make noise for their artist, and at the same time, you just don't want to be bothered, no matter who it is, because you just can't get the energy up to do a legitimate interview. You literally feel like, well, I'll just give them 20 minutes.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And that's when you know it's time to get out.
And it was always my rule, like, if I was going to give something a negative review, I would listen to it more than a record I would give a positive review. Because I felt like if I'm going to say that it's bad in public,
Yeah.
in a medium that can impact their sales and their reputation, I think I at least owe it to them to try and understand what they're doing.
Sure.
Like if I just go in and say, I don't like this, well, what does that mean? And people do that with your book. I don't like it.
Yeah,
I don't appreciate it. If you're going to say you don't like it, well, read it first.
Yeah.
But I felt like I owed that to them. So as it went on, I was listening to albums more and more and more. I wrote for Alternative Press for years. And there are albums now that like I see them on my dusty CD collection shelves. And I'm like, did I ever listen to this? I don't remember what this is.
Right.
Or if like I'm looking for an old file, like on my computer, I do like a word search and something will come up and I'll see an old record review. Like, who wrote this? My name's on it? Like I literally don't remember like 5 years of music that I wrote about for a major music magazine. I put the effort into it at the time, but it was just no longer important to me. And at that point I needed to tap out and let somebody do the job.
Right.
That's
no. And there's
really cares.
And there's nothing worse in the world than having somebody call you out for changing your opinion. Like, I'll give you a funny example, man. Matt and I were doing the metal show at obviously we did it for 12 years. And at some point we were playing some song and I'll be honest, I was not paying very much attention. I had the headphones off. We had a guest in studio. I was bullshitting with the guest. You know, Matt always ran the show. And I was always kind of the, hey, so tell me about what you're doing guy. You know, I was that guy with the guests. And so I wasn't paying attention. And Matt gave the signal for 30 seconds. So I throw the headphones on and it's Machine Head. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. And Matt comes out of the song and he goes, hey, what'd you think about that, dude? And I was like, yeah, that was pretty solid, man. Good tune. You know, and it really wasn't meant to be, you know, some analysis. It was like, yeah, good tune, you know, and ultimately I really didn't listen, didn't even know what it was. It just was on and I heard 30 seconds at most. No sooner do we go to break than a guy calls up and is like, you're a fucking liar, dude. And reads me back my own words where not only did I say that the album sucked, but I narrowed down to that specific song and said how bad I hated that song. And I was like, son of a bitch.
That left a mark.
Dude, and after that, I made sure that I never again made any sort of a comment about something that I wasn't paying attention to because I just didn't want to get smashed like that. You know, that's the worst when you're, as a writer, and you know this, and, you know, you can comment on this, the only thing that we have as writers when we write whatever we write and put our name on it and put it out there for everybody to buy, they can like it, they can hate it, they can disagree with every word that you put in that book, but don't ever give them an opening to say you have no integrity toward those words that are in that book. That's the worst.
Yeah. I mean, like, you can disagree with my opinion.
Yeah.
But I'm not just making it up. I'm not just filling pages. You know, I care about it. I believe what I say. And that's what I think, like, a good writer should do. Like, if I never agree with you, then that's okay. At least I know where you're coming from. Mm-hmm. If I say, well, Chris hates that album, but he always hates this kind of thing, so that means I'll probably like it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. But the worst would be is if somebody picked up your Slayer book and read the whole book, and then they heard you on an interview saying, you know, I never even listened to Slayer. You know, it would be like, dude, what the fuck? You know, it's crazy how that works, man.
Yeah, so say what you will, but I mean, this is what I care about. Mm-hmm. You know, this is what I still care about. I'm not listening to a bunch of other stuff that I don't care about. That's why I'm not in the business as much anymore.
Sure. But at
other people should do it.
No, they should. But at the same time, what I like about what you do is you take a ton of risks. Not necessarily, I guess risk is probably the wrong word, but you purposely are not building yourself into I'm going to use this guy, and he's a friend, so I'm not using him in a bad way. But you don't paint yourself into like the Martin Popoff category where if it says Martin Popoff on it, you know that it's primarily metal and it's primarily from the 70s and the 80s. You know, you take some risks. You know, you have the Slayer book, you have an advice book, you have a couple of comic books, you have the Donnie Iris book, which is like a totally, if there's an artist more opposite of Slayer than Donnie Iris, I don't know who it would be. You know, but you not only take on different projects, but you do it in a way that it's clear that you've done your homework and you didn't just slop something together and slap a famous name on it so that you could sell some books.
Oh, well, thank you. I try not to. You know, it's kind of a mess. You know, as I'm at the point where, like, I kind of kick around the idea of maybe getting an agent, that kind of thing. But
Sure.
agents want a certain kind of person that can say, hey, this is me, and this is what I do, and this is what I'm like, and this is my passion. And, you know, as somebody who's trying to put himself out there, like, I don't really have that thing where I think about myself in those kind of outside terms.
Right.
And I would probably sell more books if I would stay in a lane and just be like the Slayer guy and the metal guy. And I think at the end of the day, when you're able to look at everything I do, it will make sense. But right now at this point, it kind of limits my prospects to have like a few how-to and motivational and best practices books. And on the other hand, have some comics. And on the other hand, have like a karate book. And on the other hand, have like a Goodfellas book.
Right.
I don't know that it makes sense to most people, but I think that when I'm done and you can connect all the dots, maybe it will.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, and the thing is dude, you got to do what your own passion is. It's funny, man, when I'm writing a book right now, which is it has a title, but I won't get into it, but it's about my exploits in Korea and in the military. And it is absolutely it is what it is. It is sex, drugs, and rock and roll all the way through.
I was going to ask if you could describe it in terms of
it's
content and ratings. What would you say?
Everything that you see people complaining about in the Me Too movement is in this book. It's just not. It's not going to be politically correct. And I've shared some chapters with some friends, and it's dirty. I'm not going to make any bones about it. It is really dirty, but. The big comment that I've gotten back from friends and family and whatnot that have read little pieces of it is you're torpedoing your career because you wrote these 2 books that are considered self-help. And this is going to be so far out of left field that you're going to piss people off. And I'm just kind of like, well, so be it. You know, that's who I am. I'm not trying to write toward other people. If other people want to read it, I'll be clear. I mean, it'll be very clear in the descriptions and whatnot of what it is. But I'm not gonna not put out a product that I'm anything less than 100% behind, no matter what anybody thinks. And I think
that is more useful and responsible as a role model.
Sure.
You know, in this Goodfellas book, I'm not saying I have it all figured out. You need to be like me. I think that's what more successful people do. I think people respond to that. They love that. You know, they love to think, well, this guy has it figured out. That girl has it figured out. I'm going to be like them. I need to act like them. People like that, but that's bullshit. Yeah. You know, if you get close enough to them, they're a jerk. They are the proverbial self-serving motherfucker.
Right.
You know, I try in the Goodfellas book, I make observations about things that I think are true. But I don't claim to have all the answers. I try to ask more interesting questions and just give you things to think about.
Sure.
Because what works for me will not work for you necessarily, and what works for you will not work for me.
Right.
You got to do you.
Yeah. And
you know, and if you're out there saying, I'm Chris Aiken, I have it all figured out, I'm perfect. I may have made mistakes in the past, but now I'm perfect, and I'm trying to launch a multi-million-dollar brand here.
Yeah.
That questions your integrity.
Right.
That leaves you open to, you know, certain suspicions.
Right.
Well, but I think that the mere fact that you're not claiming that you are perfect and you haven't figured out leaves you credible.
Well, and I think that in the end, in the end, if you want to succeed, and I, it's weird because I never look at myself as quote unquote successful. And I mean, I've done some cool things, I've obviously got several businesses that I've built, and I've written books and the radio and blah, 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 blah. You've
been in the game for a minute.
Yeah. I can read my resume, and I'm happy when somebody tries to call me out as being an idiot or something to say, okay, let's match resumes. But in the end, the thing that I think that I do better than anybody is continually learn. And I think that is the most important thing. And I think that that's a theme that is in your Goodfellas book indirectly, is that there is no answer. There's no, to be quite honest, there's no Tony Robbins answer. There's no, well, if you just do this and you say this and you believe this and you say it 10 times, you'll be a millionaire or you'll be a billionaire or whatever. The reality is life is going to throw you every different curveball under the sun. And then once you've hit all those curveballs, it's going to throw you a screwball that no one could see coming.
Yeah, you've mastered HTML, Chris.
Yeah.
You're the best at it.
Yeah, great. Great. Well, that's why, yeah, and now there's Java and now there's CMS and everything else. So, you never stop. If you do stop, then you've limited yourself as far as you can get. And the message that I've taken away from your book, from Good Advice from Goodfellas, is that it's an evolving, much like the movie, it's an evolving plot. Your life is an evolving plot. And no matter how much you prepare for, you're never prepared for the next thing. The next thing's going to come, and it's going to be something you just didn't see coming. But if
and nothing works 100% of the time.
Right. And that's the key, is that, the lesson from early in your book may not work in the later part of your life. It might work. Yeah,
I talk about that fallacy of frictionless professionalism.
Right.
We like to think if we always just learn these 10 basic steps, and here's how you can bootstrap yourself to success by following these 10 easy rules of how to.
Right.
That's not how it works,
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I think most people go about their lives. They think, well, we just have to do it. We do it this way, and this is the rule. Mm-hmm. In sports management, like literally being a manager of a sports team, mm-hmm. there are conventional moves that you make, and you're never going to get fired for making those conventional moves.
Sure.
But on the other hand, that doesn't make a difference in things.
Right. Do you find as somebody that produces a lot, that people will tell you, oh, that's amazing that you do bop, 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 bop. And you look at them and you think, no, it's really not. It's amazing that you don't. Do you have that? Because I have that. I get that all the time. People are like, I don't know anybody as busy as you. And they always, blah, 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 blah. And I always think to myself, it's like, you know what? Stop watching fucking Netflix and do something. I always get into that mode where, and maybe that's just the workaholic in me, but I don't look at what I do as anything amazing. I look at it as normal, and I look at everything else as less than normal. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have like the highest opinion of myself. I mean, I think there's so many things in my life. I think, how am I like the one person who has ever figured this out?
Right.
Like if I know this, then surely everybody else can figure this out,
Right.
Like what is wrong with the situation that I'm the one guy who's pointing out that this is a colossal waste of time, or that this doesn't work, or this. But that's what it takes, is that you got to want to do it. Mm-hmm. So many people are so qualified to do so many things, but most of them do not.
Right.
People will look at your book and say, well, that's not how a proper book should be, and this is not what it's like. If I were going to do a book, I would do it like this. Yeah. But they don't actually write that book.
Right.
LeBron James has that famous passage taped in his locker. He said, "The man in the arena." You can be on the sidelines talking shit from the sidelines, or you can actually roll up your sleeves and do things.
Right.
Not everything you make is going to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But, obviously, if you look at my comic strip books, I obviously believe that something that is not perfect and is done is something better than, it's better to be imperfect and done
Right.
than to just have something in your head that is perfect and will be perfect one day and never happens.
Right.
We're not at the bar at happy hour hanging out with our friends talking about the books we want to write here.
Exactly.
We've made some things, and maybe they're not perfect and maybe they have flaws, but they're done.
Right. And dude, the one thing that I like about Suburban Metal Dad is the fact you're not trying to out art anybody, but you are what you do through humor and through almost like an old school vibe of comic strip-ism, I guess. I don't know what the right term would be, but what you're trying to do is send a message, but in the old school kind of, haha, that's funny. Oh yeah, but there's reality to that. And I'll point to one that I picked out of the book that you had with the you have a little strip in the new book, which it's called what? Christmas Sevenfold, like the event.
Christmas Sevenfold.
Yeah.
Suburban Metal Dad Compendium 2. It collects 7 years of my annual Christmas comic strips because I'm a big Christmas guy.
Sure.
That Slayer and Christmas go hand in hand.
Of course they do.
And Goodfellas.
Sure. But there's one strip in it. It's a smaller one, but it talks about a mom and a dad, I guess, that are at a like a preschool play or performance, choir performance or something, and it really focuses in on the parent that can't put their phone down long enough to actually pay attention to their kid performing. And I read it and I laughed. The first time I read it, I laughed. I was like, that's a cute little thing. And then I thought about it, I was like, that is as 2018 as anything. And people should read that. They should see it in a newspaper, not to get the funny, but to get the irony of how much that relates to their life today.
Why, thank you. Yeah, that's I'm not a filmer. I think if you're watching your kid in the play, you should watch your kid in the play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's so ironic that they're trying to film. He's trying to answer texts. He's doing everything but watching his kid. And all the kid would, and this, dude. I mean, what do your kids want more than anything? They want to run off that stage, give you a hug, and say, you know what? That was really great what you did. They don't want to watch.
Want you. They want your presence.
Yeah, they don't want to watch it on your phone. And the last thing they want to do is look up for that 1 second when they look off stage trying to find their mom and dad and see their dad texting or something.
Yeah.
It's such a, and I don't even know if you went into drawing that one with that thought in mind, but that was the thought that I came away with was, wow, is that a microcosm of everything that is wrong today?
Yeah, I wrestle with the idea of keeping suburban in the title, but, people of a certain strata have that kind of thing. That's I'm fortunate that that's the world that I live in, where you have people that act a certain way or think they should act a certain way. But people do that. We're so obsessed with managing our lives and presenting a certain image and documenting our lives that we're missing our lives. We're not living our lives. Everybody's, again, I guess there's that kind of theme that you're chasing this image of being a certain kind of person, and you're not actually being any kind of person.
Yeah, no, you're so right, man. Well, dude, this has been a lot of fun. This is a lot longer than I think either one of us thought it would be, but man, you and I, we literally live the parallel life, man. It's really, for me personally, it's very cool to talk to somebody that gets it instead of me doing the standard, hey, you got a new book. What was that like to write?
No, me too. And that's really, if we can offer anything to your listeners, it's that if you want to be the kind of person that does things, and I say this in class, I say this in life, I say it to everybody, somebody out there is doing the stuff that you want to do. Mm-hmm. It might as well be you.
Yeah.
You can go do it. But if you want to do that, it takes a lot of grind. I say at the beginning of the Goodfellas book that this book is brought to you by 7-day grind.
Right.
Wake up so early it hurts, and pay now, play later. Mm-hmm. You got to make some sacrifices if you want to get your stuff out there. I believe it's worth it. But sometimes, I mean, like, you're the kind of guy I would hang out with. I don't see Matt nearly as much as I would like to see Matt. I don't email him as much as I would like to, because there are things that we want to do and things that we want to get out there.
Right.
You know? So you can be a person who's at happy hour talking about the book that you want to write, or you can be a little bit tired and feel a little bit burned out, but you can look at those 6 books you got on the shelf and think, okay, I did that.
Yeah.
I'm doing my thing.
Yep. Dude,
Henry Hill and Goodfellas did his thing. You can do your thing.
Exactly. And I know for me, I have a folder on my computer that says Chris's books, and it has there's 14 folders open, which means that I have at least 8 more ideas coming.
I call mine Secret Evil Plans. I stole that phrase from Dennis Leary.
Nice.
Secret Evil Plan. What I just completed was Secret Evil Plan. Over the last 12 months, I scratched off Secret Evil Plan number 1, number 5. I'm looking at the list here. Number 10 and number 16.
Oh, wow.
So I still have a few more on there. Same thing. You just got to make the list and check off the list.
Exactly.
Revisit the list. Well, good luck with the rest of those folders, man. I'm looking to see what you do next.
Well, they'll get done. Well, dude, tell people where they can buy Slayer or Goodfellas or Suburban Metal Dad or anything else, the Donnie Iris
All
book.
of my stuff is available on Amazon. Ships free with Prime. You can get it all right now. You can just Google DX Ferris, and that'll point you at my various stuff. DXFerris.com will get you there. D like David, X like X-ray, Ferris like Ferris wheel. Slayer Bio will get you there. SlayerBio.com. 6623press.com. Just Google DX Ferris. The stuff will come up pretty easy. But all the books are available on Amazon now. Plenty of time to get them for Christmas.
Excellent, dude. Well, people should definitely get them for Christmas. And, dude, this was really a lot of fun, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you very much. I'm glad, as I said, I'm glad that you read the book. If it works for you, that means that it works.
Very cool, dude. All right, man. Let's let the people hear it. How about that?
Hey, thank you everybody for listening. Thanks for indulging my bullshit. Have a good holidays. Have a good new year. Make something good happen for yourself, huh? Because you can.
There we go.